Welcome to SLN on the Strategic Leadership News Network podcast. Dr. Murray, our host, will extract strategic leadership do's and don'ts from news stories and current events to help business leaders accelerate their strategic implementation. Now, here is Dr. Murray with today's episode with strategic leadership insights from today's hot news topics to help you reach strategic goals and vision fast. Let's lock it in.
Right, welcome back to another episode of Strategic Leadership News. News you can use to help accelerate your strategic leadership. Talking about leadership, there's been a major leadership news in the news cycle this last couple of weeks. Of course, you had to be under a rock to not hear the news about the leadership change in the United States government. The elections happened November 11th, I think it was. And of course, the Trump and the Republicans took full sweep of the presidential, the House, and the Senate. I believe they basically have a leadership change across the board. Now, anytime you have change, whether it's in a government, an organization, family, a sports team like a basketball team, anytime there's change, there's a great chance that VUCA will be accelerated. Now, you guys, you've heard me talk about VUCA before. VUCA is the acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a military leadership paradigm that helps military leaders deal with the VUCA environment that is in a battlefield. And in military combat, everything is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that paradigm fits real neatly into the world of business and leadership. And anytime there's a leadership change, and especially one as sweeping as the past presidential elections, there's going to be an amplification of VUCA. Things will become more volatile, more uncertain, more complex, and more ambiguous, even if it's just in the short term during the transition. Particularly in this case, it's going to be very volatile, very VUCA, because of who won the election, right? And the agenda that is posed in terms of making sweeping social, economic changes in the landscape of America. So we could strap on our belts or seatbelts, anticipating a very VUCA environment here in this new presidential term. Typical responses. So if you were a Democrat, it was paranoia. If you were a Republican, it was euphoria, right? And those are probably natural responses. But a better response would be what I call the strategic leadership response. Here's where, rather than running and hysterically in paranoia or in the jubilee and euphoria of victory, as you know the other side would, you take a very contemplative look at the potential changes and you strategize to maximize. Right? Strategize to maximize. You got to look and see what's coming down the pike and position yourself as a leader, position yourself and your organization to maximize the vocality. That's a word I just made up, vocality, VUCA-ality, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. It's going to go crazy here in the next term. So yeah, some of the changes that you could anticipate, are going to be regulatory shifts, economic fluctuations. In fact, talking about economic fluctuations, the day after the elections, the stock market went ballistic, right? And to kind of show you the interconnection between politics and economic fluctuations, right? I mean, everybody knows that, but here's a good example. Um, One of the biggest supporters, if not the biggest supporter of Trump, was Elon Musk. Quite frankly, bro is probably the vice president, quite as it's kept. I don't know, man. Yeah, I think he's the vice president de facto. But anyway, biggest supporter, $75+ million to the Trump campaign. The day after Trump won, Tesla's stock, I mean, skyrocketed. Um, Huge numbers. It said estimated that Musk's net worth went up by $20 billion based on that post-election boost, right? So there's going to be a tons of economic fluctuations. Maybe not all as magnanimous as that, but you can anticipate major economic fluctuations coming down the pike as a result of the election results. And some other changes, right? There's going to be significant changes in support for minority-owned businesses. Now, I'm going to do an entire podcast on that because it's one of those areas where I see a lot of my minority business owners and leaders bordering on paranoia because of Trump. Okay, of course, we know that Trump had much better than expected numbers even within the minority community, but still, majority of minorities have significant and some valid trepidation about the Trump agenda. So I'm going to do an entire podcast on that and sort of frame it in the context of how business owners and business leaders, minority business owners and leaders, could extract opportunities, from the Trump agenda, so that they can then fast track their own business success. So that's going to be an entire thing. But you can expect those kinds of changes. So with the regulatory shifts and the economic fluctuations, changes in minority support for minority businesses, social changes in terms of support for DEI, all those kinds of things have created a conflagration, if you would, right? Is that a real word? I don't know. But has started a fire of VUCA, vocality, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. How do you, as a strategic leader, position your organization, your team, whether you're a minority or not, whether you're Democrat or Republican or independent, right? In the midst of the vocality, how do you position your strategic leadership agenda to extract from vocality success and strategic sustainability? That's kind of really, that's the approach to take as a strategic leader, right? You don't have time to get caught up in the hysteria of paranoia on the one side, or the hysteria of euphoria on the other side. You ain't got time for that. You've got to say, okay, here are the cards that have been dealt. Now, how can I win in the game? How can I find a winning hand in the cards that have been dealt? Right? That's leadership. That's how leadership thinks, right? And if you're a strategic leader, even more so. That's your mind. That's your mindset. That's your approach to everything as a strategic leader. How could I extract success where people see panic, right? So how do you strategize to maximize opportunity when vocality is rampant, right? And trust me, as we have established, it is going to be rampant for the next 4 years. How do you extract opportunity? How do you strategize to maximize opportunity in a VUCA environment? So there's three things I want to kind of touch on in this episode today. And keep in mind, each one of these strategies to maximize that I'm going to touch on briefly, you could check my resource page to get in-depth one-on-one coaching for you and your leadership team and your organization, and how as a team together you could be on the same page, right, when it comes to strategizing to maximize. Look, it's one thing for you as a leader to have a forward-thinking vision in the midst of brutality, right? But if your team is mired in pessimism and doomsday paranoia, you can't take your organization forward, at least not as effectively as you'd like to, if everybody is sort of hiding under the rock because they're afraid of the new regime in power, right? Everybody's got to be on the same page. So we have made available and will be making available over time corporate training material and resources, conferences and webinars, master classes, etc., that you could get your entire team, at least the decision makers in the organization, on board so they could have an eye out for opportunity. They can know what to look for so you as an organization can move forward in spite of the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? So additional resources available on how to do that. But let me kind of touch upon a couple of three things here, right? To be able to strategize to maximize, right? Even when things are going helter skelter here, there, and everywhere, is three things. One is what I
Join Dr. Murray in the next podcast session as he talks about the 3 ways business leaders and business owners can maximize strategic opportunities in Vucality. Subscribe below to get notification as soon as the next session is published.
Come back and join us in the next part of this episode as we talk about the 3 ways business leaders and business owners can maximize strategic opportunities in Vucality. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe so I can send you notification when the next episode is ready. And don't forget to share this podcast with other business leaders and owners in your network of influence.